The next question is from Patrick Commons.
Patrick Commons from the Australian newspaper. I have a question for both of you. Capacity constraints in the economy, supply-side issues are a big part of the rise in inflation and now interest rates. And also a big part of that story, the supply constraint story, is around the labour market. There are severe labour market shortages. Now, business want two things. They want skills. They want a greater investment in skills, more upskilling for the nation. You both agree on that. They also want a boost to skilled migration so we can get over the hump in the near term while we skill up the country. Why is neither of the major parties prepared to come into this election with a commitment to increase temporary skilled migration, at least for a permanent skilled migration, at least for a temporary basis?
You won't see from us cheap political opportunism when it comes to skilled workers. You will see that from the Labor Party, and we have seen that from the Labor Party. Those skilled migrants perform an absolutely vital role in our economy, helping to address some of those workforce shortages, whether it's engineers on mining sites, whether it's IT programmers in our telecommunications companies, or whether it's people working in our hospitality industry. And since we opened the borders in November, we saw more than 70,000 skilled migrants coming to Australia. But it's not just about skilled migrants. It's also about labour mobility across state borders. And Andrew Barr's in the audience, and we worked together around the Council and Federal Financial Relations table to get an agreement to occupational licensing changes, which stayed in the too hard basket for more than a decade. And what that will see is more than 150,000 people benefit as they move between states without needing a new licence, paying a new fee, a new qualification. And that's going to provide more than $1 billion of lift-off or benefit to the economy more broadly. And then the third aspect of this, because there's no silver bullet, but it's skilled workers, it's labour mobility, and it's also training up the Australian workforce. And we put aside more than $3.5 billion in the budget for 800,000 new training places with a fundamental structural reform to our skilling system to replace what is known as the NASWAD with the states and the territories, and to use the National Skills Commission front and centre with more efficient pricing and a better model rather than untied grants to the states. Our focus is on addressing some of those workforce shortages, which are very real, but I do point out to everyone here, it's a very clear contrast with Australia's previous experience after coming out of recessions. In the 80s and the 90s, unemployment remained elevated for up to a decade. This time round, when you speak to employers, the biggest issue is where do I get more workers? That's good news for young people entering the workforce, and that will be good news ultimately for our economy.
Yeah, I don't think the Chief Minister will let me live down that you beat me to an Andrew Barr shout-out, so well played. Look, I think this is one of the defining issues in the economy, and we are up for a sensible conversation about the optimal migration mix as we emerge from the pandemic. My colleagues, including Christina Keneally and others, have talked about trying to get that balance right between permanent and temporary. I think that is one of the big challenges. But bringing people in, even in sensible ways, should never be a substitute for training people for opportunities as well. You know, I agree with something that Josh said, which is that inevitably it is a mix between the two things. Too often, I think, in the public conversation about skills and migration, people pretend that it's one or the other, and in reality, of course, it's a mix of both. Now, our issue that we have with the government is they spent a long time hacking away at training and skills and TAFE in our economy, and now all of a sudden the chickens are coming home to roost. If you look at the Reserve Bank Governor's statement yesterday, I thought one of the things that really leapt out at me was the issue that you raise about capacity constraints, and skills shortages are probably the defining capacity constraint. Now, training is a big part of it. We've got a policy for fee-free TAFE, more than 400,000 places. That's part of the story, but also childcare is part of the story here. If we want a bigger workforce, we need to make it more attractive and easier for people to earn more and work more if they want to, and that's a story about parents returning to work as well. So our policies are geared towards this challenge specifically. We've got inflation running out of control. We've got real wages falling. Part of that is capacity constraints domestically, not just the international issues that Josh likes to lean on. And so that's what our policies are all about dealing with.